Today we're diving into the viral image of Mohamed Zakaria Ayub al-Matuk, the child portrayed as a victim of starvation in Gaza. Now, you've probably seen this photo splashed across the media, but there's more to the story than meets the eye. But here's the kicker. While this image spreads worldwide, food supplies meant for Gaza are sitting unused, blocked by the UN and political red tape. So why isn't anyone talking about this? And why is the New York Times claiming that there's no proof that Hamas is stealing aid? Stick around as we unravel the truth behind the headlines and expose the misinformation surrounding Gaza's so-called famine. Welcome back to another episode of The Quad on JNS. Now, here this week, we are back with our panel. We have Ruthie Blum, the host of Israel Undiplomatic and senior editor at JNS. Of course, we also have Shoshana Keats-Jaskel, the co-founder of Chochmat Nashim. And we have Ateret Shmuel, who is the founder of Indigenous Bridges. Glad to have you all here with us for another week of The Quad. Unfortunately, we still have very heavy topics to talk about today. It's been a very busy week. We've seen a lot of accusations thrown around against Israel, accusations of starvation, famine, and a number of other things that we hear across the international media. Now, this was coupled at the same time with a lot of usage of photos that, in fact, were not from Gaza, or if they were showing something entirely different than what the media actually intended to show. In one example, there was a young boy who has cystic fibrosis who was featured in an Italian newspaper. In another, there was an example of a young Gazan who has muscular dystrophy, who was featured on the New York Times and multiple other publications. And this isn't to say that there is no suffering or starvation in Gaza. Of course, there are incidents of this. But what is the media trying to portray when they intentionally use these photos and these video footages that aren't entirely accurate of what's actually happening on the ground in Gaza? It's an intentional misrepresentation of what's happening. We do have also the New York Times claiming this week that aid is not actually being stolen by Hamas, citing, of course, anonymous sources. So we'll talk about all that and more here on The Quad. But first, Ateret, I want to turn to you about this whole misuse of photos. How much impact do you think this has on public opinion and how people are perceiving the war and what's happening on the ground inside Gaza?
I think it is a huge, huge issue. This is modern day blood libel. The repackaging of those evil Jews killing babies is these evil Zionists starving Gazan children. It's not true. It's not happening. In this situation, from a factual humanitarian standpoint, we have more humanitarian aid and food aid going into Gaza than any other conflict in the entire world. And it's the fact that Israel is providing humanitarian aid in the first place to the people who are actively attacking Israel and still engaged in an active war is an unheard of thing to begin with. It's crazy that this is happening, and yet it is, and it has been this entire time. But the intentional disinformation campaign to try and stir up hatred, animosity, and ultimately violence and then justification of violence against Jews by painting Jews as whatever the world sees as especially evil at any given moment is exactly what legacy media is doing right now by using, at first they were using pictures from Yemen, from Syria, places where there actually are real food insecurity and starvation issues. There are many different countries in the world right now that are facing real famines, like Sudan, South Sudan, I think Ethiopia and Eritrea are still in trouble, Haiti, and Yemen, of course. And so a lot of the pictures that were taken at the very beginning that have been sprayed all over the media since October 7th, like before there even was any
Right, because they've
response.
been claiming there was a famine for practically since October 8th,
forever, which we know is not the case. In fact, that there's a really high instance of obesity in Gaza, and there's plenty of food that's in. There is an issue, however, from the UN's side, from the UN, which has been partnered with Hamas this whole time, and their refusal to distribute the humanitarian aid that Israel has been dutifully getting into Gaza this whole time. But even so, we are not seeing, and I checked, and I double-checked, and I triple-checked this the other day, because I didn't want to say anything publicly that could be used against me. There is no statistic evidence right now. There is no significant increase in child deaths, in deaths from starvation whatsoever in Gaza. We have trouble getting any real data out of Gaza because, of course, the people who are in charge of releasing any information about things like this is the Gaza Ministry of Health, which is just Hamas. And obviously,
but one of the things that's interesting I saw this week is that when people were talking about the casualties that are being reported from Gaza, one of the things that we've seen, especially in the past few weeks, is that the hospitals have been instructed to say that everyone who has been killed was seeking aid.
Yeah.
There was a report yesterday I saw about how several Gazans were killed in the pursuit of, receiving aid at a distribution point. And it said 1 or 2 of them were shot nearby the distribution point. Okay, maybe that could make sense. And the other 2 were shot in their apartment. So they were in their apartment or they were looking for aid. Like it doesn't add up. A lot of these stories are just not making sense.
Right. And of course, they also probably were pregnant children who were also press and doctors at the same time. But the real point of all of this is that the intentional disinformation campaign is specifically aimed at making people hate Jews, and not just hate Jews, but it will and always has directly led to violence against the Jewish community, and that's what the legacy media right now is doing. In times of the New York Times, BBC, all of these major news agencies that people really trust and believe in have been running these absolutely false stories using false images this entire time. And we can see the impact of that. The rise of anti-Semitism globally is astronomical.
Now, how do you balance that with the fact that, there is suffering in Gaza? Some of the things that we've seen, some of the incidents that have happened, even if it's not because of us, are horrific. What the people of Gaza are suffering through, even under Hamas alone, aside from the war, it's awful. So how do we balance fighting back against these blood libels with what is actually happening in Gaza? You want to take a stab at this?
I think that, since the beginning, when we talk about genocide, what is genocide is intent. The Israeli government, the Israeli people on the whole, I'm not talking about the people who like to make a lot of noise and have no actual influence on what Israel does, but the overall Israeli does not want to see children. And I don't mean just see. They don't want children to starve. They don't want people to be slaughtered. They don't. We don't. The problem is when you're in a war, and an impossible war, because again, I'll say this again, if Hamas would say, we give up, the war would end immediately. We give up, here are your hostages, there's no suffering. But Hamas and the Palestinian cause has always been about the more we suffer, the more we get sympathy. The more we get sympathy, the more we'll receive from the world. Why? Because that's how they think Israel was created, right? Israel was created according to the world because we suffered so badly in the Holocaust, so they throw us a state. Right? So, of course, they're learning from that to say.
Which is, of course, not true.
But, sorry if I didn't make that clear. That is the narrative. That is the image that they're being sold, or that they've been sold for decades. And so the more we suffer, the more the world will feel for us, the more we'll receive, which is the playbook. Just look for a minute. Just think a minute. Look at they knew they weren't going to win October 7th. They knew, yes, every dead Jew is a good Jew for them, but so every dead Palestinian is a good Palestinian for them too, because that is what they are buying that's what they are, that's their commerce, that's their commodity. So the more dead people, the more people care about us, the more we'll get what we want. And so that is their playbook. October 7th was just a way to get us to come in, and Israel did what it had to do and whatever. And they are suffering, we are suffering, and this is the quagmire that is the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, that is the Hamas-Israeli conflict. And so, yeah, there's suffering going on, and it doesn't have to be that way. It certainly doesn't have to be that way. Hamas can end this war, Qatar can end this war, Iran can end this war because they're the overlords, but they don't want to. And so we're stuck saying, okay, we have to fight this war, and there's a huge civilian population that is in our way. And it is tragedy abounds in this world, and unfortunately, very much so in the Middle East. And we can only talk about what we see and let people know what's actually, as far as we know, what's actually going on, and try to parse that out. But people have to think.
Well, there was, of course, a temporary blockade on all of the humanitarian aid going into Gaza from March, I believe it was, until May 19th. And then from May 19th, we saw that 4,500 trucks were approved by Israel to enter. They were on the Gazan side. We saw that at least 950 of them throughout last week had not been moved at all. These were the trucks that needed to be distributed. The aid needed to be distributed by the UN. Now, there was a lot of conflict from both sides saying, that the other one was responsible. Israel was stating that the UN is refusing to move aid, actually brought a group of journalists down there to show the pallets of aid, water, baby food, all kinds of necessary supplies for the population that were simply not being moved by the UN because they refused to do so without being accompanied by the blue police, which is Hamas. So the UN actually asked for Hamas, which is stealing aid, to accompany them to distribute aid to the people. In addition to that, we see from the UN reports that 85% of all of the aid that was distributed by the UN from May 19th until last week, until July 23rd, was actually intercepted. Not all of it was stolen by Hamas, but 85% was intercepted, meaning it didn't get to the distribution point, to the people who needed it. Either other civilians took it and looted it, or Hamas took it and looted it. So clearly, the UN is unable to actually distribute this aid. Meanwhile, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation has already distributed, I think it's 95 meals as of last week, 95 million, excuse me, just since May 19th. What is your response to everything that we're seeing? This, he said, she said, it's the UN's fault, it's Israel's fault. Whose fault is it, and what's going on?
Okay, first of all, we know that the UN is a bad actor. We know that UNRWA was actively an active participant in the October 7th massacre. We know hostages were held in the homes of UNRWA employees, etc. The UN is a bad actor. Otherwise, the UN would be happy to help distribute the food alongside the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. And the fact that Hamas, one of its key demands in the failed negotiations, so-called, was to get rid of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Why would Hamas not want the people to be fed? As you said, Shoshana, and you also said it, that the whole idea is that Hamas wants pictures of starving Gazans and wants pictures of dead Gazans. And this brings us to the topic of Pallywood. Pallywood is the name for the Palestinian fake news movies, that's, Palestinian Hollywood. We've seen it throughout all the intifadas and the wars, and the news outlets like the New York Times, certainly Al Jazeera, pick up on it uncritically. You can see a picture of someone who's supposedly dead, and he scratches his head under his sheet and things like that. But I would like to now say why this is the spread of this horrible lie of a genocide and starvation is largely due to or abetted by Israeli journalists who go around the world, including on Piers Morgan. By the way, you were great on Piers Morgan. But, the Israeli journalists who go on there and say, yes, we are committing genocide in Gaza. They say it in Hebrew, they say it in English, they publish it. We have Barak Ravid. We have also Omer Bartov, who wrote an op-ed in the New York Times saying, I'm a genocide scholar, and I know it when I see it.
That's what I was
and
responding to on Pierce, by the way.
Oh, that right.
Yeah.
And actually, he's many years a friend of mine. Of course, we haven't been in touch in a while, as you can imagine. But after he wrote that op-ed in the New York Times, everyone picked it up. And not only that, everyone's interviewing him, everyone. And it's just going viral. So I'm not even going to blame him for making his career on that, because I've known him for decades. He's always been a leftist. But this goes way beyond it, especially since he actually is a genocide scholar. He's a Holocaust expert. That makes it even worse. But at least he is an Israeli, and he fought in the Yom Kippur War. But he lives in America.
Oh.
Whereas, and so, you could say Barak Ravid does it too, but we have our homegrown Israelis living in Israel. You turn the channels to these left-wing channels, and all they do is talk about that, how everyone is starving in Gaza. Some of them outright blame us for it. Others say, well, we're not doing it on purpose, but the Israeli government stinks, and therefore it's not doing a good job at countering it or countering the narrative. The whole point is that the lies spread, and this is one reason that I get kind of upset when people criticize the government for not having good hasbara, in other words, public diplomacy, countering these. Now, that may be true that we don't, but lies, but you see, lies travel faster than the truth. And one thing you have to say on Israel's behalf is that if there's a tragedy in Gaza, the IDF says, okay, someone accuses the IDF of, blowing up something or killing people in a hospital. It says, let us check. And it takes a couple of days to actually check the facts. The lies just go around the world. It's Churchill said, by the time a lie goes around the world, before the truth has a chance to put its pants on. So that's the reason that I say, and when you have Israelis who have platforms, major platforms, saying, it's true, we're terrible, it's a little hard to counter that from a government spokesperson.
Right. And I think that's something else that and I tweeted this yesterday because I just feel it so intensely. Hamas has created itself a win-win-win situation, okay? They win if they win if they lose, and they win if they die.
Yes.
Like, there's no losing. I got to figure this out as a mom, how to have win-win-win situations. But like, they have created a situation where they win and we lose in every situation,
Yes.
okay? So but more than that, I don't believe for 1 second that the Hamas, Iran, Qatar, Islamic Jihad goal is a Palestinian state. Not for 1 second. It's absolutely not true. They've never actually tried. They've never actually gone for a Palestinian state. However, they are very, very invested in making Jews hated around the world and destroying Israel. And that is what they are winning. You're talking about Israelis being kicked out of cafes in Vienna. You're talking about kids, Jewish kids, French kids getting kicked off a plane in Spain for saying Hebrew words. You're talking about Israelis not let off of a mono cruise in Greece by the local populations. They are winning this global war.
Not to mention the fire bombings of synagogues, the attacks, the murders of Jews in the streets.
I'm only talking about the past 48 hours that I know about, But yes, attacks around the world against Jews. And that is why, Ruthie, I have to take a little bit of issue with what you're saying, because as much as Israelis can say, and I feel it sometimes that Israel, I don't really care anymore what anybody thinks, because they're going to lie about us anyway, so I don't really care. And I think that's a lot of what the government, with the Hasbara. At the same time, we really can't say that. Like, we can't. We can't. We can say it once in a while, but we actually have to take responsibility and say, yeah, we are on the global stage. Everyone else has maybe a tenth of a camera, maybe 1 day a year on them, and we have 15 cameras on us every 10 minutes all around the world. And we have to acknowledge our position in the world, and we have to do something about it in the best way that we can. I'm not saying we're always going to win.
This was also my argument. It's obviously a double standard, obviously. And so on its face, it's ridiculous. At the same time, if we're going to be able to implement our military goals, if we're going to be able to achieve what we need to achieve, we also need to recognize the other war, the Hasbara war, and the fact that the odds are against us and that there are double standards. So how do we deal with that? That's, I think, where, in my opinion, the government has fallen short. Multiple governments, not this one specifically, but multiple governments, because we know that they're going to say these things. We know that they're going to make up stories. We know they're going to use false photos. We know they're going to claim that the IDF did things that they simply did not do. It's not new. So because it's not new, and because we fought this war with Hamas multiple times, why are we not prepared for it? That's my criticism.
Well,
why is there not someone who is embedded with every combat unit of the IDF whose job it is to document? Not the sniper, not the soldiers, not the medic, the person whose job it is to document what's happening. Some of it will be internal, some of it will be external. But at least we know that everything we did, we have documentation of, not of the person with the body cam, but of what the unit is actually doing.
And we're also not responding in kind. We do not respond to accusations appropriately. This has been a major issue for a very, very long time. And I actually was speaking to one of the leading experts in psychological warfare about this. I was like, why is it that we can't get, there are people like me who really grew up inside of that anti-Semitic bubble. I was, and as a Jew, I organized for Antifa.
Well, you're doing it wrong. If you accuse Israel of genocide, you can be on Pierce Morgan.
Well, so that's the whole thing. That's the whole thing. You have, and that's one of the reasons why Jews who go against the state of Israel are given such celebrity status, because there really is this very complicated there's a situation. Either you embrace your Jewish identity and you are completely ostracized from most avenues in life, work, social spaces, definitely activism spaces, and actually you face physical violence now. Or you're a good Jew, and you're a good Jew who goes against the evils of your own people. This is all in quotes, yeah? And then you are embraced by this whole Free Palestine movement, by the academic institutions that have become like the modern Nazi propagandists. And you're given celebrity status. The more that you speak out, the more outrageous your claims are, the more platform you're given. And for a lot of people, that feels like love and acceptance. And they don't have a connection to Judaism. They don't have a connection to Israel. They don't feel it. And so it doesn't matter to them that they're literally endangering the lives of the Jewish people all over the world. And that kind of propaganda, blood libel, has literally always led to violence, and it is leading to violence now. And when we participate in it, it makes it even worse, because people are much more likely, some of the worst anti-Semitic propaganda that I see it's taken from, what is it, that 972 magazine or Haaretz, or like whatever, with some token Jew. And tokenization obviously is a form of racism, but we keep seeing our own people fall into these traps and not get it.
Yeah.
Well, I don't mean to cut you off, but speaking of tokenization, I wanted to circle back to what I mentioned before about the New York Times, which quoted this anonymous source, anonymous Israeli official, I think said, claiming that there is no proof of aid that's being stolen by Hamas. Now, before we discuss that for a couple of minutes, I just want to show the video that we have featuring some of Hamas's best hits stealing humanitarian aid from Gaza.
باقي لي مساعدات بسرقوها طخوني عشان بدي اكل اطعم اولادي. والموز موز والبلح بلح واللحم لحمه واليوم لفات رز ولفات رز.
So as you can see, there is plenty of documentation, even from Hamas themselves, of stealing humanitarian aid. And despite that, we have seen the IDF respond to all of these accusations and controversy this week by increasing the amount of aid, by implementing airdrops of aid from Jordan and UAE, as well as other countries, opening up more trucks to enter through Rafah. And the UN has, due to public shaming largely, started at least to distribute some of this aid. So things, I think, for whoever is innocent in Gaza are going a little bit better, hopefully, in the next couple of days. But I want to ask you, we'll start with you, Ruthie. What is the New York Times doing? What is with these token, soldiers or officials? They get always anonymous, of course.
Yeah, speaking of the New York Times and Israelis who go against Israel, Ronen Bergman is a New York Times writer. Notice also that the New York Times now has about 20 bylines on stories so that you can't pinpoint.
Who did
but,
that?
But that's another outlet like Axios that has Barak Ravid. We have foreign outlets with this Israeli experts. And in many ways, they are experts, and that makes it even more dangerous, as I said. But I just want to make 2 points also about information and disinformation. The government, I worked in that government office for several months. Governments are inefficient. There's bureaucracy, there's contracts, there's this, there's that, there's the other thing. It's terrible, okay? Unlike, for example, you, Yosef Haddad, who does amazing work. I've found
I think
that
I know him.
I think you know him a little bit. He does he does a fantastic job. But one of the reasons he does, aside from the fact that he's talented and really good at what he does, is that he is not constrained by government talking points or by government contracts. You can't do this, you can't say. Let me tell you, when I worked there, one of the things you have to decide is you can't tweet or something. So that doesn't help. All right. Now, governments, I don't mean the Israeli government. All governments
yeah.
are inefficient as hell. Better to have private endeavors. So I'm not sure how that'll work because, people have to get paid. They have to, when they work. I mean, you can't
Also
just
need
say,
information.
do everything. Yeah, they need information. But I'm saying there's an advantage to not having it. And the other point I wanted to make is, if it really had to do with the lack of hasbara, on October 8th, October 7th, we were massacred and burned and raped and kidnapped. And by October 7th at night, the anti-Semites were out in full force on Columbia and Harvard campuses. We hadn't even responded.
That's decades. They're working for decades.
I'm aware of that, but what I interpreted from that is that actually that slaughter, you'd think counterintuitively, that slaughter enabled all of the latent anti-Semitism, or people who after the Holocaust were kind of careful not to be open about it. They could criticize Israel and say that's not anti-Semitism, etc. After October 7th, it was like the floodgates opened. And I don't mean, we have only another 2 weeks of legitimacy. I'm talking about immediately Jews are weak. They're being slaughtered. Now let's just jump on the bandwagon. And no amount of hasbara would have cured that.
I don't agree with that, actually. Well, there's some pieces of it that I do agree with, and there's some that I don't. I think that one of the things that we keep overlooking, and one of the things that I keep seeing that the government keeps overlooking, is that there really is this well-oiled, very wealthy machine that is cranking out in many different places, that's mainly Qatar, Iran, Turkey, Russia, China, that have basically spent the last 2 decades purchasing legacy media, purchasing independent media, purchasing social media, making sure that they've sprayed all the internet with bots everywhere. And that they continue cranking out back to back all of these outrageous blood libels all over the place. And they've also taken over universities, institutions of education all over the West. They've purchased land. They're taking over it, like all sorts of institutions. And there is a systemic and systematic disinformation campaign that is sort of like infiltrated almost all avenues of Western civilization, and there has not been any legitimate response or countering of that. And there are
from us, by the way, from the United States.
No, the United States has no idea what is coming to it.
Yeah.
And I keep seeing this, and it's horrifying. I had one of my deputy director just came back from the United States, and he was saying that the only thing that's on the news is like some CEO who got caught cheating at a concert. Yeah. There's nothing about the Druze. There's a legitimate genocide and starvation and famine happening to the Druze in Syria right now. There are massacres of Christians happening in Nigeria right now. Hindus are still being massacred in both India and Bangladesh. We have the Copts who are still being so many.
26,000 people in Yemen have died from famine. 85,000 of them are children.
There are real issues from a humanitarian perspective. There are real issues that need to be addressed, and no one can be bothered to pay attention because everybody is so singularly, obsessively, compulsively picking away at this Israel-Gaza thing because of their latent anti-Semitism. But
not so latent anymore.
It's no longer latent. But there have been many of us that have been screaming for a very long time about how to effectively counter this growing movement years and years and years ago, and nobody listened to us. There was no resources allocated to organizations that were effectively countering these narratives. There were no resources allocated to actually getting people in front of cameras that could have made an impact. We suck at optics. We really suck at optics. And we keep letting things happen like the State of Israel, Hezbollah, all of the organizations that actually have money. And if we had been a little bit better at that, we probably would still be in a similar situation, but I think that we would have more backing.
Agreed.
Because we keep, if you think about, here's a very simple example, right? One of the things that is done on a regular basis in order to continue to promote this propaganda narrative about Jews being white European colonialist settlers who represent all that is evil in the world, especially to the left, is that they will always put in an interview, say like Piers Morgan or something, they will put like a beautiful dark-skinned Palestinian woman against a white-appearing man who has like emotional issues, and like and they will set up a situation in which you have this perception of asymmetrical power relationships, where it's like misogyny and racism and homophobia and all of these things that they seem to just try and be like pushing in this narrative, which are not actually at all representative of the actual situation on the ground in the Israeli people or the Jewish people as a whole. And this narrative keeps getting pushed and pushed and pushed, and you can't get anybody to change this dynamic in front of cameras.
But don't you realize that Israel has so many people of different colors and all that? Don't you realize that Piers Morgan, for example, just as an example, wouldn't want an Ethiopian Jewish woman?
Of course.
You're right. You're right. And they picked somebody, but I saw something worse years and years ago. I remember people would say, "There's no good Hezbollah. Look at the Israelis. They have in a debate. The Israeli has a heavy accent. His English isn't good." Next to a Palestinian whose English was terrible and had a bad accent, and everyone is focused on the Israeli. But my point is that you're right that we need to combat it. But I've heard Christians say Christians are being slaughtered all over the Middle East. And the Christians are also complaining, where is the organized Christian community? Why don't the churches that have all this money?
But there's
why
one
don't they-"
Jewish state and there isn't one
No,
Christian
you're
state,
absolutely
so
right. You're absolutely right. But my solution, if you want to call it, it's not really so. I guess you could call it a solution, is that aside from all this, what always helps, the only thing that helps is victory. When we're strong, after the 6-day war, after Entebbe, after the beeper thing in Hezbollah, suddenly people admire us, and certainly Middle Eastern countries. They say, "Oh, Palestinians," but they really wanted us to beat the crap out of Hamas so that they could join the Abraham Accords without feeling that they attached themselves to the weak horse.
But the problem is that we put ourselves in a position in which we don't have anyone to answer in an articulate way anything. And I don't mean to go on Piers Morgan or to go on some TV show and speak about it. I actually am of the opinion that most of the Hezbollah and advocacy should not be from government.
Yeah.
I turned down many government jobs. I don't want to work with the government, right or left. That's
Also,
not
it
my
won't
goal.
be taken as seriously because they'll say, "Oh, okay, she's a government mouthpiece, so of course
They
she's
say that
gonna
anyway,
say-"
even though I never have.
Right,
But
exactly.
yes.
But of course.
But what the government isn't giving us, people like me and other journalists who actually do want, they don't give us the answers. But forget about backing, financial back. I'm not asking for that. They don't give us the answers. If I contact the army or the government and I say, "We're being accused of this, what is this video? Where is this coming from?" No one knows.
I know.
No one has an answer. "Oh, we don't know, we have to investigate." Or the worst, and this is something culturally that happens a lot in Israel, is people will say things that they don't actually know. And for me, I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll believe it when I see it. But if other people don't know that, then this is what they report and we look like liars.
To be fair.
And this can't happen.
To be fair, right. Well, anyone with a phone, and everyone has phones in Gaza, anyone with a phone or Hollywood or whatever can make up any lie or make up any story.
And they do.
And how many can the army investigate in the midst of a war? I'm going to put that aside for 1 second because I think something that you said was really important for our audience who are not mostly Israelis and who are, global and a lot of people around the world. And I appreciate you watching. I want to say this. What starts with the Jews never ends with the Jews.
Absolutely.
There's a reason they're going after the Jews and delegitimizing what we have to say first. Because we're the only line, not the only, we are the first line of defense for Western civilization. And when they take us out and when they delegitimize us and when they say, "You Jews have no idea what," meaning that really it's the Jews' fault and so we can take them down and it's okay, you're next. And I'm really not being alarmist. Okay, I'm really not being alarmist. This is just the way it is in the world. So there's a reason they're running after the Jews. There's a reason they're delegitimizing Israel, because then there's nothing left when they come for the rest of Western civilization. When they start with the,
You saw in Montreal protesting outside a church.
That's what I'm saying. And people need to really, really, really not look at us and say, "Well, really understand what's happening." Take a look and understand why all the universities, why the real estate being built, what is the end game here, and what does that have to do with you?
I want to add to that a little bit because this is a conversation that I keep having with people, and people are really not getting it. And I think that it is really critical for especially our Western audience to understand this. Why, Why do we think that Qatar, Iran, Turkey, China, and Russia have purchased legacy media? Why do we think that they have purchased the academic institutions? Why do we think that they are changing the curriculums for kindergarten through high school through university? Why do we think that they are getting their narratives implanted into every facet of Western civilization? Why do we think that they're investing in people to change Wikipedia definitions? Because this is an all-out war. And when you look at there's this really problematic misunderstanding of the way that Islamism and colonialism works in the Middle East and North Africa. Americans specifically have this very rigid black-white racial dichotomy that prevents them from being able to understand, from this like deep sense of like white supremacist racism, that brown people are capable of the same thing that white people are. And that in and of itself is extremely racism, and people really need to unpack that. But one of the ways that that manifests is that they cannot comprehend that Arabs and Islamists are one of the greatest, most genocidal, most violent, brutal colonialist empires in the world to date. They have taken over huge amounts of Asia, the Middle East, and Africa, and they are actively, their entire stated open goal is global caliphate. Now, the nature of global caliphate is world domination. It is by definition global. And the reason that they are investing so much time and money and energy and resources and manpower into manipulating the public perception of the West is because they are coming for the West.
I don't think I could have said it better myself, and that actually does segue very well into our Scumbags and Heroes, which is our most popular segment here at the Quad. I do want to add one more thing about that, and that is that our discussion of starvation, all of this actually started on the PR front because the Muslim Brotherhood called, along with Hamas, on July 20th for a global campaign, a PR campaign across media and social media to accuse Israel of intentional starvation. We saw this across all the Muslim Brotherhood groups, including in the West, in London, in America, in Canada. So this was a very coordinated campaign from the get-go, as you mentioned. But without further ado, I would like to go to our Scumbags of the Week. Ruthie, who do you have for us this week?
Okay, I've got a twofer. Okay, these are two scumbags who deserve each other, and they're interconnected. It is Emmanuel Macron and his wife Brigitte. In other words, Emmanuel Macron, anyway, I was going to choose him as the scumbag of the week for recognizing a Palestinian state and abetting Hamas by doing that. But interestingly, the other scumbag related is Candace Owens, who has exploded. Now she's on the far right. She's the woke right anti-Semite who is now, has been for months now, accusing Brigitte Macron of having been born a man. And she says she has proof, and that Brigitte actually was a boy until high school and had a sex change operation. She has been promoting this and promoting this and promoting this. And Brigitte Macron, who, as far as I'm concerned, she deserves what she gets, but okay. The funny part about it is that Brigitte Macron is now suing Candace Owens. And we brought up Piers Morgan before, who's also he's kind of, he leans towards the woke right, because he's not a leftist. He hates Israel from the right.
Qatar.
Piers Morgan also said on his show that Candace Owens is a liar and that Brigitte Macron is a woman. And so Candace Owens made a bet with Piers Morgan for $100,000. And he said, great. And she said, boy, Piers is going to have to pay up. Anyway, so those are my joint scumbags.
I hope they bankrupt Candace.
Those people.
That was some really important tea.
Who cares?
Get it out of her pants, weirdo. She's so gross. I
ridiculous.
hate her so much.
She's terrible.
Yeah.
Terrible.
I can't.
But I don't really like
Brigitte
what
Macron
happened
is
to her.
no great choice either.
It's not about her. It's
No,
about
not
crazy
about her.
Candace.
No, but the point is, it'll be interesting to see what happens with that lawsuit.
Yes, for sure. We'll have to have an update about that one. Who's your scumbag of the week, Shoshana?
Oh, my scumbag of the week is Rami Abdul. Of the people on the internet who make their careers off of anti-Semitism, Rami is up there towards the top. He's an assistant professor of law and finance, chairman of Euromed HR, and he's gross. And he tweeted this: the director of the Kinneret summer camp was arrested after insulting Spain. I'm sorry, are we in the medieval times? Okay. Insulting Spain, and 50 French Israeli kids chanted death to Arabs on a Vueling flight, assaulted crew, and spat on a passenger who said free Palestine, according to witnesses on social media.
Then social media.
It seems this is the origin of the idea that these kids, these French kids on a Spanish flight coming back from summer camp, were chanting death to Arabs and therefore deserved to be kicked off and assaulted and harassed, with the 21-year-old, I think,
Yes, counselor.
counselor, thank you, arrested violently, and you can see this on the internet. There's zero proof whatsoever that any of these kids chanted anything other than, from my understanding, they were doing some, if you've gone to camp, or even if you haven't and you know people who are annoyingly back from camp, they do all those camp chants like, Mashiach, now, or all those things that they say, which is just like camp stuff. And it's not death to Arabs. But of course, this guy has to take every opportunity that he can to blame the Jews for bad things, to justify the bad things that people do to Jews. You're a scumbag. You could join the other scumbags in the scumbag hell for all of eternity. Thank you very much.
And thank you for your attention to this matter.
Thank you for your attention to this matter.
Ateret, who's your scumbag of the week?
I also have a twofer. Mine are the anti-Semitic propagandists that would make the Nazis gasp. Mainly legacy media. Organizations like the BBC, like NBC, like ABC, like all of the New York Times that continuously pump out intentional disinformation and anti-Semitic, medieval-esque blood libel, specifically aimed at like drumming up hatred, animosity, negative feelings towards Jews, and then ultimately violence, and then justification of violence against Jews. Well, they intentionally ignore real genocides and real crises that are happening all over the world where people actually really need help. Right now, there is an actual genocide happening against the Druze. We have, and I work with the Druze, we have information from inside that somewhere between 1,500 and 3,500 people have been slaughtered, and somewhere between 100 and 1,500 women and children have been taken as sex slaves. And there is absolutely not a peep on Western media. Not a peep, because everybody is so obsessed with Gaza. So obsessed with Gaza, and the only reason for that is because they can use it to hate on Jews. Now, I want to call out someone specifically who isn't legacy media, but I think is actually probably one of the most dangerous anti-Semitic propagandists out there today, Miss Rachel. Miss Rachel, I think, is even more dangerous than legacy media because people aren't expecting that she is sharing propaganda. They go to her looking for wholesome childhood education. They want, snuggles and nursery rhymes and songs. And what they get is literal Nazi propaganda, literal blood libel, the intentional and obsessive picking away at Israel in any way, shape, or form, the lies after lies after lies of poor, suffering Palestinians, the Holocaust inversion, the obsessive, compulsive need to make it seem like Jews are evil. And it's not to people who have if you're not expecting to be showered in propaganda, you have no barriers to it. You haven't built up any protection. You're not waiting for it. You just want, your kids to learn the ABCs. And somehow she is using her platform to target women and children, vulnerable women and children, to get them on board with her like Hitler Youth-esque hatred of Jews. And I think that she is remarkably evil.
But all right.
Wow. No, I it's really true what you're saying. It's one thing if, you say, I'm an educator and I want to use my platform to raise awareness. Okay, so raise awareness of a lot of things around the world. Because when you only raise your awareness of one thing, even if you're not lying, which she is. Even if you're not, it creates a disproportionate idea of what's going on and versus the rest of the world. So if you're going to raise in a good faith, you have to be talking about everything.
Well, the thing is, she's published fake photos repeatedly.
Well,
She's published that claim, you know, accusing Israel of killing 14,000 babies. She was all up in arms about that. And then the video was suddenly mysteriously deleted after that didn't happen. No apology, no acknowledgement.
Because they
nothing.
said tomorrow 14,000 babies are going to die in Gaza tomorrow of starvation.
Yeah, well, but also I think
Yeah.
one of the most dangerous forms of anti-Semitic propaganda out there, and the most effective, especially within my communities, that it's literally infested the minds of most of the people that I know and have grown up with, are these propaganda narratives that it's not anti-Semitic to be against genocide.
Right.
It's not anti-Semitic to be against slaughtering babies. It's not anti-Semitic to be against murdering innocent women and children and doctors and nurses and press, because that's not happening.
Yeah.
That's not happening. That whole narrative is based on the premise that that is happening, which it is not. And so it's countering the accusations of the legitimate accusations of anti-Semitic propaganda before they even happen by pretending that what they're saying is a known fact, even though it's complete BS.
Right. And speaking of BS, my scumbag of the week, Mahmoud Khalil, could have been one for many weeks, but alas, I only got to him this week. He is involved in a lengthy legal battle with the Trump administration, who are trying to deport him for his support of Hamas. He effectively acted as the spokesperson of the pro-Hamas movement at Columbia University. And also was accused of passing out materials that were created by Hamas to students on campus. These are protests that had chants of, you know, death to America and death to Israel, calls for intifada, a violent uprising against civilians. They burned American flags. They chanted anti-Semitic things. They harassed Jewish students. They violently assaulted Jewish students. They hijacked an entire building at Columbia University more than once. They injured security guards at Columbia University. So effectively, what he has, fueled is domestic terrorism and a domestic terrorist movement. And for that reason, green card holder Mahmoud Khalil was singled out and scheduled for deportation back to Syria, where he's from. This has been an ongoing battle. What his lawyers are doing are suing everyone as much as possible in as many places as possible in order to delay the inevitable. I do think he will be deported, but this week in particular, he's my scumbag because he's been going on a media and political tour, meeting with different Democratic members of Congress, which is absolutely shameful for the Democratic Party, but that's a whole other issue, and going across the U.S. media, speaking about how terrible the situation is in Gaza. Now, why you have someone who explicitly supports Hamas, which is the biggest oppressor of the Gazan people, speaking about the Palestinian people and what's good for them is already on its face absurd. But in this interview with CNN,
just to be clear here, though, do you specifically condemn Hamas, a designated terrorist organization in the United States?
It's disingenuous to ask about condemning Hamas while Palestinians are the ones being starved now by Israel. It's not condemning October 6th, where 260 Palestinians were killed by Israel on before October 7.
Mahmoud Khalil refused to condemn Hamas. He's refused to condemn Hamas in any of the other interviews that he's done. And in response to the reporter asking him to condemn Hamas, he said, well, I think it's disingenuous to ask to condemn Hamas when Israel is intentionally starving the Gazan population. So again, circling back to the Hamas/Muslim Brotherhood talking point from July 20th, it's a disgrace. There should be no problem to condemn the acts of violence against Palestinians by Hamas. That doesn't take away from any criticism that you might have of Israel. But he's not interested in that because he's not interested in the well-being of the Palestinian people. He's interested in smearing Israel. That is his only goal, and that is yet another reason why he should be deported. So Mahmoud Khalil, you are my scumbag of the week.
Wasn't he also an undergrad for 18 years without ever graduating?
Could be, I'm not sure.
Wasn't he also like a very
Not in
specific,
America, though.
in Canada and the
By the way, I just would like to add one thing about your perfect scumbag. First of all, he also wants to kill America. He hates America too. But aside from that, one of the heartstrings, he was playing on people's heartstrings because his wife, his wife was giving birth and he wasn't going to be at the birth, and the baby. He has not spent 1 minute with that baby because all he's doing is going around the country, like you said, meeting with Congress, meet on TV. I don't think he sees that baby very much.
Well, I don't know. And also, I don't know about his background. It could be. There's several activists who have done this that have been exposed.
Well, I remember when I was in university, we had a plant. We had somebody who came in his 30s into undergrad, and all he did was organize for anti-racist action and the Students for Justice in Palestine. And all he did was basically make other students hate the Jewish community at Brown University. And it only occurred to me after finding out about this guy, whose name I don't even want to say, that was actually what was happening in my university. So this has been like an ongoing thing. This is part of this all-out war on Western civilization that is happening, where they are implanting people into the student bodies. And I think that that's what he was as well.
All right, well, to wrap up on a positive note, of course, we're going to do our heroes of the week. Ateret, who do you have as your hero this week?
Oh, I actually, I have a few, but it's my team. The Indigenous Bridges team over the last few months has done the impossible. So our organization basically is an international Indigenous rights organization that brings leadership and representatives from different Indigenous tribal nations from all over the world together to work for our common goals and combat our common issues. Several members of my team are Druze who have family in Syria. And the Druze, like so many of us other Indigenous tribal nations of this region, faced all-out genocide at the hands of Islamists, Julani's Syrian military. And nobody spoke up, and nobody stood up, and nobody said anything, and nobody tried to help, except for the state of Israel, who was then promptly condemned for it. But there was no one going into social media except for Druze and Israeli creators who were trying to get this information out there. But my team of people from Native Americans, First Nations, Khoi from South Africa, Copts, Druze, Yazidis, Kurds, Assyrians, Arameans, different representatives from all of these different tribes, all of whom have actually experienced this kind of genocide themselves, all of them put their heart and soul into getting this information out there, into fighting for one another, into standing up for one another. And we're seeing these people we now have, we actually have a Native American couple here in Israel right now that are working with soldiers who have been wounded and PTSD. We have Copts in the U.S. educating on the dangers of anti-Semitism and Islamist colonialism. My team has really stood up and done the impossible over the last few weeks, and I really just want to shout out to all of you because you're amazing. Indigenous Bridges, you are phenomenal, and I love you, and thank you for the work that you're doing.
Shoshana, who do you have?
My hero is very personal this week. If you watched last week, you know that my person, Laura Ben David, passed away, and her funeral in Shiva was this past week, and I was very, very out of it, meaning I was there and not in the world. And my heroes is something that you guys can all be at home when someone you know is going through something. My friends were amazing, and they made sure that we had dinner and that we had Shabbat food and that I was never alone, even when I was alone, checking in on me, asking how I am, what could they do for me, just being a cushion for me, knowing that there's nothing you can do to change a devastating loss for someone else except be there for them and let them know that they're never alone and that you'll be their safety net. So my heroes are my people, my friends, who I will not embarrass by naming by name, but my point is so that everyone at home understands when someone is going through something and you feel like, I don't know what to say, there's nothing I can say that's gonna make it better, be there. I'm here. I'm here for coffee, for tea, for walk your dog, whatever it is, that alone is priceless, and you can be somebody's hero. And that's what I want to leave for everybody this week.
Very positive message. Don't think we would have gotten through everything since October 7th without the people in our lives who have been there for us through different periods that were particularly difficult, that continue to be difficult. But definitely an important heroes to remember. My hero this week is the Crown Prince of Iran, Reza Pahlavi. This weekend, he held a gathering of different Iranian groups from across, different ethnic and religious communities within Iran for a conference of different activists and leaders in Munich. And during that conference, he also had a statement of unity that was signed by members of different ethnic minorities inside of Iran. And he also announced that over 50,000 officials, military and security officials from the Islamic Republic of Iran have actually signed up for the platform that he launched to encourage defection for some of these people. So it was exciting to see things moving in the right direction. This is a very divided community. There's a lot of debate, a lot of argument, but nonetheless, it was great. Although not everyone is on board yet, it was great to see that there is significant support, that other voices and other opinions are given a platform, and that there is a space for that in the call and pursuit of regime change and a free and democratic Iran. So Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi, my hero of the week. Ruthie?
Okay, my hero of the week is Ambassador Mike Huckabee, the U.S. Ambassador to Israel, who this week, he really, first of all, he does this a lot. He cuts right through the crap. He posted on X also about Emmanuel Macron's recognition of a Palestinian state and quipped. He has a lot of fun. He's actually quite funny. And he quipped, really, you want, where is a Palestinian state? It'll be in the French Riviera. And he called it Frankenstein. Instead of Palestine, Frank, F-R-A-N-C, Frankenstein. That's one quip. And the other, he attacked the New York Times and the UN and other media outlets, what he said of the UN and the New York Times and everything. Thank you so much for helping Hamas's narrative about all this starvation, et cetera, et cetera. And then he said, he takes these very serious subjects, and then he's very funny on it. And he said, well, why do you think Hamas doesn't want the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation to be distributing the food? Oh, is it for humanitarian reasons? Yeah, right. Like Jeffrey Dahmer is winning MasterChef is going to open a restaurant. So he's my hero of the week.
All right, he's done a lot of good work in response to the bad claims against Israel for many years. He was also at a TV show. He was a TV show host before, right?
He did, yeah, and a governor, and he's always been very, very pro-Israel, and he's also a funny guy, and a musician.
Yeah. All right, well, that pretty much wraps it up for the Quad this week. Next week, we will be back with our fearless leader, Fleur Hassan Nahum, who has been out of town for several weeks, but we will be back on track next week on JNS with the Quad. Thank you for joining us.